Welcome to your podcast, Leadership is Tricky, where we'll tackle various topics, challenges, and experiences as it relates to your investment in leadership. So, let's design success together. Now your hosts. Hey everyone, Eric Ocasio here with Leadership is Tricky, and we are back. For those that are tuning in for the first time, thank you for tuning in to Leadership is Tricky. And for those that are repeat listeners, thank you for your being a loyal audience to the podcast. Today, I have a guest that I've been trying to get on for almost a year now. So Garrett Yee, or Major General Retired Yee. How are you, sir?
Doing great. And Eric, thanks for having me on the show.
No, thanks for joining in. Like I said, we've caught each other in passing in multiple events over the year or so, and then we finally got it done. I know you're busy, well-traveled, because I see all your posts on LinkedIn. I've seen you in person. So do you even know what time zone you're in right now?
I'm on the East Coast time zone at this point, yes.
Right. Yeah, and we were just talking a little bit. So you're headed off here shortly to go off on another few trips. So where are you headed next?
Headed to Asia. We're headed to Hawaii, then Korea, then Japan, then back, all in about a week. So it's going to be a pretty quick run around that part of the globe.
Right. Yeah. As someone that travels a lot in my job as well, a lot of folks are like, oh man, you get to go to cool places, but sometimes you just want to lay in your own bed, and relax. But you get tired of eating out, being in the hotel and all of that. So, all right. So we're going to jump right in. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Garrett Yee. Currently, my wife Maria and I, we balance our time between the East Coast and the National Capital Region, and in California, where we have a home and our children are there, and we have 2 grandkids, and
wow.
Just retired from the Army after a combined, 35 years of active and reserve time. I finished up at the Defense Information Systems Agency, and since then I've joined a company called General Dynamics Information Technology. I've been there going on 2 years.
Yeah, how was that transition? Is it night and day, or you still trying to get your feet underneath you?
Well, like anything, there's always going to be an adjustment, right? And whether in the military or in the civilian world, you take on a new assignment, and there's always this adjustment that you have to go through. The one thing that you adjust, though, is you don't have to wear a uniform every day. And so you'll often hear folks that transition talk about, the challenge of what to wear. So that seems kind of mundane or routine, but it's actually a thing. But, in terms of the higher level transition adjustment, for me, it's been good. It's not been without a little stress, not been without a little bit of, adjustments on my part, but seem to have made it through it okay so far.
Right. I could imagine after 35 years of service, and then you take off that uniform, and then you go to the corporate world the next day. It could be an adjustment, because I know when I got out of the military, it wasn't as hard, right? Because I did 7.5 active, and then I did another 10 years of reserve time. But for me, it was, the next day, like, man, now I got to pick out some slacks. I remember my first interview, I wore this shirt that had cufflinks, and I didn't have cufflinks, so I just used a staple, those types of things, right? But yeah, so just going back to your early childhood, how'd you grow up, and how was that like for you?
I was very fortunate. I had a father. He was a school teacher at the time, stay-at-home mom, and kind of a traditional, strangely to use the term all-American family in a way, right? 2 parents, a dog, 3 kids, 2 siblings, right? And going through just the American public school system, kind of like anyone else, in my mind, right?
Right.
It was in Boy Scouts. I played sports, I wrestled, I played football, just the things that normal kids tend to do growing up, right? And through Scouts, became interested in the military. But also, my father had served in the Army during World War II, as did several other of my family members, and a couple of years ago, I did a little research project on my family, that family members that had served. And I found like 15 others that had served, a great uncle, a great aunt, like 5 or 6 of my uncles, first cousin. I mean, I have 3 nephews. I mean, all of a sudden, when you step back and look at that, you say, wow, that's a lot, and no wonder I maybe had this sense of longing to be a part of the military, or to do my part, I guess is what I would say. And so initially, I got a Navy ROTC scholarship.
Okay.
Um, and I was going to Santa Clara University as an undergrad, cross enrolled at Cal Berkeley at their Navy ROTC program. And after a couple of semesters or a couple of quarters on academic probation,
We've all been there, right?
I found myself out of a Navy ROTC scholarship. So I got kicked out of the program.
Wow.
And fast forward, though, a year later in my junior year, I signed up into the, Army ROTC program, not on scholarship. I couldn't get a scholarship, but I joined Army ROTC without a scholarship and got commissioned as a second lieutenant. So I was able to make it through that. Maybe if there's a lesson learned there for me, and maybe for those that may be listening, that may be, college age. When you get kicked out of something, in college, and I was a teenager at the time, 19 years old. It's pretty devastating.
Right.
The things in your life at that time, everything's amplified. And so probably when I look back, one of the, lowest points of my life up until then, well, the lowest point of my life up until then, age 19, getting kicked out of Navy ROTC, losing my scholarship, trying to figure out how to go to college and what's next, right?
And you
And
probably had the added pressure of your father being a school teacher, right?
oh my gosh, yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
You go from hero to zero, in a year, right? You
Right.
graduate from high school, you get a scholarship, you're doing great stuff, and then, there you are, a big failure. And the message is, we all have ups and downs, just got to get up. And it's okay to fail sometimes, just learn from it and move on. And so that stuck, and that stuck with me. It still sticks with me today. Maybe there's always the fear in the back of my mind that, I'm going to fail like that again, so I better keep working hard.
Right. Just as you explained it, I could see the trembles there for a little bit, like, oh no. Right. It's interesting though, is because I graduated high school early, and then thought about doing the whole college route, but I just didn't have the self-discipline that I needed, just to persevere through a lot of things that get thrown at you in that world. Because like high school, you're kind of closed off, and you have the perfect holding environment with your family. You really just have to go to school. Then you go to college and you're really on your own. You have to drive yourself to go to class on time and study and focus and be around the right people. And yeah, we push our kids a lot to focus on school, but I don't want to be to the point where you're putting that fear in them, and like they're striving for perfection. Because I think that they'll be stuck in place at some point. Just with all that added pressure. But so you get commissioned, right? And where'd you ship off to first?
Well, this is an interesting story. So another twist in life, I guess. My branch was military intelligence.
Okay.
And but during college, I got married. And so my junior year, Maria and I got married, and we had a baby my junior year. So I had a young family.
Right.
And so I'm thinking I'm going off to Fort Huachuca for the military intelligence school. Now, to go there, you have to have a top secret clearance.
Right.
And as cadets, you have a secret, right? You get commissioned, you have a secret clearance. So in the application for the top secret clearance, I found out that Maria, who I'm still married to, 38 years later, was at the time not a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
Now, I didn't know that. Okay. A year and a half into our marriage, I learned that you can't get a top secret clearance because your wife is not a U.S. citizen. So So, so we, started the process for her to become a U.S. citizen. She grew up in the U.S. It was just that she was born in Mexico. So we start the process to, have her become a U.S. citizen, and it's going to take forever. So we just, changed plans, and I, transferred to the infantry and went to Fort Benning, at the time now Fort Moore.
I know Fort Benning very well, right? Sand
Yes.
Hill,
Right. Yankee North, Yankee South,
right?
all that stuff. So ended up going to the infantry school and becoming an infantry officer instead of a military intelligence officer at the beginning. But it's again another one of those lessons in life, and I sometimes share this with young commissionees, and when I talk to the cadets, I'll say, okay, someday, and maybe already, you will find the love of your life, and the sun will shine, the grass will be green, the sky is blue, flowers are
Right.
blooming, and you want to get married. Yeah, that's wonderful. Just, it's just good to know if you're in the military. It's just good to know if your future spouse is a U.S. citizen or not. That's,
Right.
I'm not saying don't get married. It's just good to know.
Just
So
ask
you
a
can
couple
plan for it.
questions,
So
right?
you can plan for it. Just gotta ask that question. And I
Right.
jest about it sometimes, and Maria and I we joke about it. And it's good fun, and it never affected our relationship at all. And again, eventually got my clearances, etc., and still married 38 plus years later. And so just one of those little learning opportunities along the way, I guess, is what I'll say. And in terms of my military career, I initially went into the reserves, and then started getting activated, and going back and forth on active duty in the reserves, and then in the last several years on active duty. And so started off in the infantry, ended up as a logistician, and somehow ended up getting the signal stain or stain, whatever it is, and for the last many years doing signal stuff in the Army until I finished up over at DISA. And what a fun way to do that, just to see different things, and just see the world, see the Army from different lenses, and knowing that each part of what the military does, is part of the bigger picture. And so I just talked to some cadets at West Point last week, and these are juniors and seniors next year. They're thinking about what branches they want to get. The group I spoke to, they all want to be cyber, branch officers, and maybe they'll all get it, and maybe all won't get what they ask for, right?
Right.
You don't always get what you ask for, right? And so, and my message to them was, you join the Army not for a specific branch per se. You join to serve our nation. All the services equally serve, all the branches equally serve. And the bottom line is it's about service. And however you serve, whether it's the infantry or cyber or as a logistician or you name it, it's all part of the greater service to our nation. And at the end of the day, that's really what counts. There are no bad branches. They're all just different, and they give you different opportunities.
Right. But it's interesting though when you look back at because now that you're seasoned and you have experience and you're imparting your knowledge on these young professionals, young human beings that are about to enter their profession and their lives, and get married and have kids and all of that. If you look back and you were who you are now, telling young Garrett E, hey, just go out there and experience things, you probably would have looked at that person like, what is he talking about? No, I want what I want, and I want it now, right? Because I find that now, right, talking to the younger kids, and what's crazy is, I used to be that young kid, and it went by so fast, right? And they're also looking at me like I have a horn out of my head, and they're speaking a different language because there's other things that that entice them, right? That intrinsic motivation comes in from different things, and they don't really understand what their purpose is, right? So we try to help mold them and impart knowledge and share that. So my question for you though is how do you find that balance between imparting too much on them, right? Because you have so many years of experience and you've reached the the highest levels within the military, How do you reach that balance by like not imparting too much, but keeping them excited, right, about what you're saying?
Eric, such a great question. And I think that's forever the challenge of knowing your audience, right? And so, just a couple of thoughts come to mind when you ask that question. First and foremost, how do you meet someone where they're at,
Hmm.
right? And so, if we're talking about the juniors over at the United States Military Academy at West Point, you know, um, how do I put myself where they're at, as a junior in, you know, college, knowing that there is a whole world out there ahead of you and you're impatient to get there.
Right.
Uh, and one of the questions that came up in that session was um, the idea that other universities are teaching things that may be more cutting edge in certain specific areas, and they may be missing out on that. And then how does that affect, them and their careers and their ability to be competitive later on in life? And so, a very insightful question, but it reflects the competitive nature of these young adults. And my answer to them was that, and I reflect upon a speaker at my commencement from Santa Clara who was Antonin Scalia, former Supreme Court Justice. He told us, he said, I've forgotten 90% of everything I learned in college,
Right.
which was very comforting because I don't think I remembered half of that, to begin with from college at that point, and that was still fresh, right? And his point was, and this is what I share with them, is it's not, the content, it's that you learn how to think, you learn how to analyze, you learn how to be thoughtful, you learn, how to take things apart and see, the pieces and see how it comes together. That's what's important, to be able to make, you know, tough decisions and to be a critical thinker. That's what you're learning
Right.
really at the end of the day. And sure, you may be able to learn a subject, in a class somewhere else, but more important is to learn how to think, and later on in life, how to self-learn, right? You don't always have to learn in a structured classroom environment. We all continue to learn one way or another if we want to grow as individuals, as professionals. And so meeting them where they're at and being able to give them comfort in knowing that in their case, what they're learning and how to learn is relevant still.
Right.
Um,
I think one of the things I learned when I was in college, and then I went later on. I went to Harvard, and the Army sent me there. Right. And one of the professors had talked about, the hour and a half blocks of instruction are just that. It's just to give you some information. The real thing was it was the curiosity that it generates with everyone around you, and how you guys kind of just start to gel and come together to solve complex issues and problems. And I think that's kind of what you're explaining, right? I think it's really just sharing experiences with them, sharing knowledge with them, but just to spark some curiosity and see, where does their imagination, their aspiration, their ambition, their confidence, where does it all take them, in life or in that moment. And yeah.
That's great. You're spot on. It's the curiosity. It's being, intellectually curious about things in life and work and you name it. That is it. If you're curious about something, you're gonna find out. You'll do your research. So that's a great point, Aaron, about the
Yeah. So
curiosity.
so talking about research, 'cause I know we kind of you mentioned it, but your father served in World War II, and then I saw back in 2018, you were presented the Congressional Gold Medal for his service, for the service of Chinese Americans during World War II. Um, how was that for you growing up, or for him being a Chinese American in the United States of America? Um, and I'm not trying to get into you know history, just because I know that moment signifies something for your family to receive that medal for his contributions. How did you feel in that moment? And just tell me a little bit about growing up and you know with someone that served in World War II, then a school teacher, but just wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I think there was a couple of things that that really affected my father that was later passed on to me,
Okay.
right? First of all, he grew up during the Depression, okay, like many from that era. That affected them the rest of their life, and their outlook, right? It
Hmm.
could all be taken away just like that, and you have nothing. So the frugalness and being careful with what you have, right? Being Asian, right? I mean, during World War II, you'd wear a button that said "I'm Chinese" to
Yeah.
imply it's not Japanese, right? Because the Japanese were the enemy, right? During World War II. And then number three, his service in the military. All those three things affected him and who he was later on in life. He went back to become a school teacher and was told, you'll never teach because you're Chinese, straight out. And this was in the 60s, right? This wasn't like in the 40s. This is fast forward. He,
Right.
came back into teaching. And so, yes, there was, although I said, hey, all American family type, youth, there were elements of that. There's like I'm one of four Asian kids and, class of 60, my grade, and so, yeah, you get, picked on a little bit. And, young kids are, can be mean and bullies, etc. And so, yeah, there's some of that happening, growing up. I was fortunate to be able to move past that and, grow through that, but, it affected my father and his outlook. But he was tough and he got through it. And he was frugal. So although, I like to go buy things sometimes, and we all do, in the back of my mind, and better hold on to some of that stuff because it all could be gone someday,
Right.
Yeah, and then that military piece, right? In the back of my mind, I want to be just like my dad. Not an uncommon thing
Hmm.
that young kids want to be like their parents. And so just having him know that, just having known that he served, for me was something that I wanted to do because I wanted to be just like him, right? That's and then I found out like my aunt, my uncles, all that stuff they all
Right.
served, which was a lot of fun. But since we talked, touched on the, growing up Asian theme here, my mom uh, is Japanese American. And during World War II, she was and her family were placed in an internment camp during World War II, and that affected, her brothers, her family, and 120,000 other Americans that were placed into camp that were of Japanese descent. And so, for me growing up with a father who was Chinese who had gone through some stuff, and
Right.
a mother who had been through that, it was, kind of a realization that, I am who I am, proud of who I am, and thankful to get past the past in a way, but not forget the past, right? And many of the family members that had served were, Chinese and Japanese. In fact, a great uncle that served in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team during World War II, which was he's serving and family members are in the camp.
Right.
Uh, a bad situation back then. But all that to say, Eric, is that I believe that military service has the ability to change the trajectory of our lives. And so, my father who grew up with, some pretty severe discrimination, my mother and her family that grew up with that, uh, my dad served in the military, that helped change him. My uncles that I served that were in the internment camps, that changed them. And they were able, I believe, to move beyond that because of the military service.
Right. No, I really I believe that, so most of my family has served, uncles, I think all my uncles they served, my father, he served, right? And just like you said, for me, when things got real, and I figured that, I had to go be an adult in life and I didn't have the discipline. Yeah, I joined the military, right? And the military, taught me self-discipline. It helped me with my, making sure that my moral compass and my true north were aligned to something. And it also gave me purpose, right? I say it on this podcast a lot because it is a leadership podcast. One of the sayings that I say all the time is you need to live your purpose or you'll always live someone else's purpose, right? So once you find your purpose, you need to hold on to that, right? And then that's when you align your values and beliefs, and you push yourself forward with everything that you've learned throughout your time. So that's the reason I wanted to go back just to come forward, because you talked about these cadets, right? And you talked about, you going through school and having some failure and having some growth, and you had this very successful career, that now you want to still give back because now you continue to serve, right? I see that you're a part of FCA. Same. I'm part of AUSA as well to give back, and that's all volunteer hours, right? But as you moved along in your career, and now you get into the upper echelon of brigadier general, major general, like, what was one of your fondest moments during your career? And then what was one of your hard leadership challenges? And then how'd you get through that?
Yeah, I should have an easy answer for those two, but I will say it's hard because every assignment you have has a high point and maybe some challenges. And
Well, let's pick a few. Just go with
yeah,
the yeah, yeah.
well, yeah. So when I think of high points in my career, I think of the people.
Right.
That's what comes to mind for me, right? I mean, there's the mission, absolutely, and the mission drives, I think, a lot of coalescing around something so that the
Hmm.
people and the team come together. And if I look back in 2014, 15, I find myself in Kuwait as the Arsenal G6, and and the 335 commander, and it's quiet. Then all of a sudden, black flags are being paraded around social media, and
And that's out in Kuwait, right? So just for the audience, that's out in
right.
Kuwait. Yeah.
Yep. And so this is all happening, all these, social media posts with masked people with black flags around Iraq and Syria. And we've been out of Iraq since 2011. So we've been gone out of Iraq for 3 years. And we go from quiet, from zero to, 100 miles an hour in no time. And here we are going back into Iraq. Who would ever have thought that? And, went back to Iraq 5 times that year, in addition to everything else we were doing in Afghanistan and the rest of the Middle East. And so all of a sudden, it was a flashpoint for us. Well, that drove us as a team to come together to figure out this problem set. And over the next, several months and year, we came together and we got after that. We built a network out there. We put folks out there. We transitioned from, hate to get too technical, but at one point we were in ASCC, an Army Service Component Command, much like USAR, USARF. And then we became a Land Forces Component Command. And then we became a Joint Land Forces Component Command, and then we became a CFLIC, a coalition, or a combined, and then we became a Joint Task Force. So we evolved, up through the echelons of a warfighting headquarters in a very short amount of time. And it was crazy at the same time, challenging, but the right context, not fun, but rewarding, very rewarding. And the team that we had to do that was the team that we had, and we all came together. And you don't get to choose your teammates when you're already there.
Right.
And so everyone stepped up, and we look back very fondly on the time we spent together in terms of, what we were getting after, right? Not all things were good, but in retrospect, when the team came together, you knew it. And that's, I think, for many of us that serve the military, is that sense of camaraderie, the teamwork, all that. And so that was, I would say, a highlight of that assignment, being able to do that. I look back in 11, 12, and for many of us in the military, Eric, I think you can, relate. Sometimes when you're deployed is when you feel like you have something that, you're supposed to be doing. And
Right.
11, 12 was Afghanistan, and we were doing the same thing. We were trying to, we were in a surge in Afghanistan. We had just a bunch of stuff that we were trying to get after, and the team that we had was stepping up. And it was a nice blend of military, civilian, and contract teammates that helped us out. We had a group called Task Force 236. It was a, contract workforce. And I tell you what, they were so dedicated to the mission. And I still have good friends from that team that we had back in 2011, 2012. So it's interesting when we talk to our teammates about that. That's definitely a bright spot for many of us in our careers. Just to be doing that, feeling like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah, we were in I went to OIF, Operational Record Freedom back in '07, and then we were there for a while, and yeah, then the surge happened, right, in Iraq, and things got crazy. I mean, we're working 7 days a week, 16, 18-hour days, and you felt like you didn't care about the work, right? Because you didn't care about the task saturation that you were under, because you just knew that you were helping these young folks that were coming through and getting up north, and you were just hoping that they all came back, right? So you just felt like you were contributing to the success or the freedoms that the U.S. citizens back in the States, they sometimes might take for granted, right? Because they're not in it, right? And you hit on something that was really cool, is you don't hear a lot of people talk about the other folks that are supporting the mission, right? The civilians, the contractors, the volunteers, right? That all come together to make sure that we go out and we succeed and we win, right? And we protect the area that we go into, and those citizens there. We want to make sure we bring back as many people as we can home, unscathed. And it takes a community, and when you said your fondest memory was the people, it sparked this thing that I tell people all the time. I was like, look, I don't care about the work. The work's going to get done. The work is infinite. There's going to be ghosts in the hallways when we all leave this place, right? These walls have been up since the 40s, right? These hallways have been walked through by many people. I care about you. I care about your family. I care about those things that are ailing you, those things that are bothering you. Those are the things that I care about. And you're right. Every deployment, who do you think about? What do you think about? You think about the people that you served with alongside you. And you come back and you stay in touch with some of those folks, or the majority of those folks, and you're always connected, in the time that we have, because you have that meaningful connection with them. So it was great to hear you say that. Um, Now, what was one of your toughest leadership
Oh,
challenges? Because
well,
I'm not gonna
yeah,
let you off the hook.
yeah. So following, the OIR mission, Inherent Resolve mission in the Middle East, I get assigned to the Pentagon to work for Lieutenant General Farrell. Good guy.
Yep,
I was
I
very
know.
lucky.
Yep,
He brought me in to his team, but nothing prepares you for the Pentagon. Okay.
right.
Oh my gosh. Um,
One is just trying to figure out how to get from the parking lot into the Pentagon, and then those, the thousand rings that they have in the Pentagon is tough. For those that have not gone to the Pentagon, do a Pentagon tour so you know what we're talking about.
yeah, agree. I mean, the best part about working at the Pentagon is that you have just a concentration of high performers.
Mm-hmm.
People know how to get stuff done there. They are just talented, above average, dedicated, patriots. Again, it's a blend of military, government, civilian, and contract workforce that make it all happen there. And the military is coming and going, and the civilians, the civilian workforce is a continuity, and the ones that have institutional knowledge are the ones that are really, at the end of the day, making sure things happen the way they should be happening.
Right.
Really, um, all that to say though, um, you know, finding out how to get from one place to another, learning like all the every discipline comes together, and every discipline has its own acronyms and its own jargon and own lingo. And so when you're sitting in a conference room full of the J1, the J2, J3, I mean the G1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up and down, the special staff, the secretary of staff, all using different language. And you're like, what is anyone saying here? How does anyone know what's going on? Oh my gosh. So there's the language piece, let alone culturally, like, what do you say? What do you don't say? I mean, It's just a different environment as you go now. Now, folks that have gone there, as a maybe a more junior level person initially, then come back later on, that's different. But
Right.
the first time you go there, it's always an adjustment. And when you go there for the first time as a flag officer, as a general officer, the expectation for you to know what's going on is so much higher. Okay. So it was an adjustment, let alone trying to navigate, from one place to another. I recall I was there for less than a week. My EA gives me a room number to go to. I I know the generally that's be down this hall and to the left,
Right.
and I go down there and I walk into the undersecretary's office, and it's a small group with me and four other people and the undersecretary to talk about something. And I was completely like unprepared and completely like, oh my gosh, this is the undersecretary. This is just not a meeting. That was my introduction to the Pentagon. Now, eventually, I figured it out after a while. Okay, and I was there for 4 years, so by the time I left, I kind of knew how to get places. So
Yeah, I would say like one of the things that I find with a lot of the young professionals, even some of the more seasoned, I'm not going to call them old, more seasoned professionals too, is they do suffer a lot from they feel like they have to know everything at the beginning of everything, right? No matter, and what I tell folks, look, I'm the type of leader that says I want you to fail and fail often because that's how you're going to learn, and it takes you anywhere from 6 to 8 months to learn any job, right? And it takes you about a year plus to learn a new organization, right? All the different processes and all of the different lingo, the acronyms, right? Because an IT person talking to a logistics person, an operations person, it's completely a different language. You might as well be speaking alien to them, right? So what I tell folks is like, look, take your time, go ahead and fail because it's going to happen, right? And if you don't know, just say it, right? I'm never going to be mad at you for trying to do the right thing, right? And I think as leaders, and myself included, as you come into an organization at a high level, everyone's looking at you to share your intellectual horsepower and your strategic agility and all of that. I'm like, yeah, I got it. I'll do the critical thinking, but I need you to tell me what that acronym A, B, and C means because I have no idea what it means. I'm okay saying that. But I say all that just to say is like sometimes leaders we have to be vulnerable, and there's power in vulnerability. And I was just talking to my last guest, Indira, about that. But all right. So before I don't want us to run out of time, but I know that you had a very personal post on LinkedIn, and you and I talked about it when you came out to Europe. But you're really big on mental health awareness, and I just wanted to give you the floor for a minute. Just what do you want to push out there for folks to understand, and what do you want to share?
yeah, thank you, Eric. And you know, um, mental health is so important, and to me, it became something that was more important to me than I wanted it to be. I'll share. Maria and I lost our son last year, and he suffered from mental illness for several years. And
And my condolences, by the way.
yeah, thank you. And what I shared, on that post was for a while, my wife and I wouldn't talk about it with our friends and family, extended family. Our immediate family knew. We wouldn't talk about it. We didn't know how to talk about it. We felt uncomfortable, and we may have been ashamed of it, is what I shared, because
Mhm.
there is, sometimes a stigma. What happened, and what did you do wrong? Or what did we do wrong? I mean, Maria and I, we ask ourselves, what did we do wrong? Right. So we didn't talk about it for a while. And somehow, you know, um, we found some of our voice to be able to talk about it. And we would share, when, for example, a unit's getting ready to deploy, we would talk to the families. We'd say, in the next 9 months or 12 months, while your, service member is deployed, something will happen while you're away, and you will be okay. You will get through it. And whether it's a death in the family, an illness, a car accident, whatever, something will happen, and you will be okay, right? And someone had shared that with us, that you will be okay. And then I would say, in our case, our oldest son came down with a pretty severe mental illness, and we didn't know what was going on. And he just started having, he'd act out, and things were happening, and we just tell our, departing our family members that were getting ready for deployment, our story. And invariably, you know, a couple of people would come up afterwards to say thank you, and they would say, "That's happening to us," or "That happened to us," and thanks for sharing. And you know, knowing that sharing and being willing to talk about it gives other folks a sense of comfort and the fact that they're not alone. I think gave us maybe the reassurance to continue talking about it. When this happened to our son, when we first found out that he was having issues, I didn't know who to talk to, but I
Mhm.
did have a friend who had a son who had some special needs. So I talked to him and his wife, and they were so helpful, so comforting to know somebody that had gone through something. And so, we share, today to let others know that you're not alone, that it's okay to ask for help, that it's important to seek help. And if you see someone or have a friend or family member that you can tell is suffering from, mental illness or whatever, to try to help, offer them, some kind words and offer to help or whatever it is. But it's okay to engage and ask how they're doing. At where I work at GDIT, our president Amy had a couple of years ago during the pandemic recognized the importance of mental illness and the impact of mental health and the impact that COVID was having on the workforce. And so she had started this effort called "How Are You Really?" Right?
Mhm.
We oftentimes walk through the hallways and say, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, great," and not really, pause and ask, "Really, how are you doing?" And we can see it sometimes, right? We can tell if when you work with someone long enough, you can tell sometimes if something's not right,
Right.
and it's okay to ask,
Mhm.
"What are you doing?" You know, go home, take care of the sick kid or whatever it is, if something's troubling you. Um, but asking that extra, how are you really, is what we have started here at where I work. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback because it touches so many lives. It's kind of like the quiet thing out there that we don't usually talk about. So thanks, Eric, for asking about that.
Yeah, so and I shared with you off camera, but and I've shared this before on the podcast, is my family has struggled with mental health issues, and it became very prevalent after we had two great pregnancies, but we had two horrible births where I almost lost one child and almost lost my wife. And after that, right, for both of us, the anxiety is extremely high. Then you go through postpartum depression and some other things in depression, right? So and it really puts a strain on your family when you don't find an outlet to share that with, and then find some techniques to help deal with that, or if it's medication or if it's therapy, whatever it is. Um, because before all of this happened with our family, I didn't take it seriously, right? I was always told you got to be tough, right? We grew up in poverty. My dad was military, right? No, you had to be tough, right? But I had found that no, I think we need to share more, right, with those that we have meaningful connections with. And I'm not saying divulge everything to everyone or anyone. What I'm saying is find your network of people, right? Those, usually you can count them on one hand, right? I always say like my people are my people. And then, my closest friends have a finger. And then I have my thumb, which is like my, close confidant that I can share everything with. And yeah, one, thank you for sharing. And again, my condolences to you and your family. But um, I think the message is, look, we all have to just pause and care for one another and be able, be willing to share, because everyone's going through something tough. Everyone, right? There's no family, there's no person out there that has a perfect life. Although I know social media tries to portray, right? Because we only post the smiles, but behind the smiles, right? There's people that are living with fear, regret, anxiety, right? There's just tough challenges out there, and I think that if we can all just come together and share some of that with each other, I think we can move in and make some progress, or alleviate some of that stress or anxiety, or some of those other issues, or just find resources, right, that are available to us within those networks. But all right, so we're coming up on time here, and I just want to leave you with one last question that I leave, have all my guests. So if you were to leave a nugget, a piece of advice that you received over the years, anything, right, for those young, curious professionals out there that are starting their careers in leadership, what would that be?
Don't be so hard on yourself. You know, for many of us that, are always, setting the next goal and reaching for whatever's next, and it's not happening in the timeline that we want, or we don't get the job that or the assignment that we want. Uh, don't don't be so hard on yourself. All right. Life is long, right? It's how we live our lives. It's not necessarily the things that we collect along the way. It's the people and friends we make along the way. So don't be so hard on yourself if you don't get that promotion right away, or if you don't get that assignment, or whatever it is. Uh, you
All
know,
right. No, it's sage advice. So, uh, Garrett, thank you for coming on. Major General retired Garrett Yee. Everyone, thank you for blessing the podcast and sharing with our audience. And hey, so for those of you out there listening, if you have any comments, questions, concerns regarding this podcast that you'd like me to share with Garrett, please reach me at Eric, ERICK, at leadershipistricky.com. That's all one word. Please go, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can also go to the leadershipistricky.com and use the new chat feature in the bottom, and that will get to me, and we'll make sure that you get a response. And you can reach us on all podcast platforms that you like to listen to, whether it's Spotify, Apple, or Link, tune in, whatever. Then great. So, Garrett, again, thank you for your time, and signing off here.
thanks for having me, Eric.